This is the business of Africa. If it's about Africa, then it's our business, bringing big and small business issues right to your doorstep. So every now and again, there comes things that lead you down a rabbit hole and you find yourself lost in a world you never imagined existed. That moment, for me at least, came in the form of Coatings for Africa, the largest gathering of the coatings industry in Southern Africa. This is where I met Trevor Mutayi of Ore and Boss. He gave a presentation at Chem Talks about the state of the industry. Trevor, thank you very much for joining us. I must admit, I knew nothing. And by and large, I still know nothing about the coatings industry, yet we interface with it on a daily basis, I learned. So very glad to have you with us. Introduce the industry to our listeners. What is it about?
Thank you very much. What I would start by saying is the sentiment that you have just shared now, to say you knew virtually little or nothing about the industry. But the amazing thing that is that the industry touches a lot of touch points in our lives. If you imagine, obviously the simplest examples would be the buildings that we live in, the roads that we travel in, and the smartphones that we use every day, the computers that we use every day. There is a coating that is, applied on all those surfaces. And what I would like to say is that it's any industry that is probably underrated, and because of the impact that it has in our lives. So literally every part of our life is impacted by coatings. But what I would just start by probably is just giving a simple definition of what paints and coatings are. Mm-hmm. These are materials that we apply on surfaces as a thin film, primarily to protect and to decorate, as well as, change functionality of a surface. Like the examples that I've given, for example, the paint that we use on our houses, the paint that we use on our roofs, the paints that we use to mark our roads for easy visibility and for us to maneuver our roads, to give directions. All these are examples where coatings affect us. And yes, okay. And other examples that I can give is, paints that we use to paint walls in our hospitals, our hospital beds and things like that. So what I can say is coatings play a vast role in our lives. And yeah, it's maybe we need to tell the story of paints and coatings a lot louder because it affects a lot of elements in our lives.
I agree with you, because I also learned that the pigment segment or the pigment market is also part of the coatings industry, and that speaks to color. So everything that we see that has color is part of this industry as well, because you've got like fine powder that is part of the pigment segment or the pigment market that then is turned into, the paint that we see as well. You rightfully mentioned that it is underrated. I mean, at one of the stalls, I saw a highlighter. So if you're into stationery, whether it's an eraser or a highlighter, and that was also, I didn't even know that was part of what you guys do and the work that you do, so it can get as granular as that. Who are the biggest players globally, and what are the biggest or fastest growing segments within the coatings industry?
Yeah, what I would say, the top 10 players in the world in the paints and coatings industry, PPG, Sherwin-Williams, AkzoNobel. I'm sure we all know the Dulux brand. Mm-hmm. So this is part of the AkzoNobel group. We've got Nippon Paint, we've got RPM International, Axalta, Kansai. We all know Plascon, which is a heritage brand from South Africa, but it's now part of the Kansai group. We've got BASF, we've got Asian Paints, and we've got Juton. So these, I would say, these are the top paint companies in the world. And yeah, the value of the industry estimated to be around $195 billion US. And obviously these players specialize in different segments of the industry. Some are strong more on open automotive. Some do, participate in all the segments like decorative, industrial, protective coatings and all that. And then in terms of the segments that are fast growing, I would say Protective coatings is one of the segments that is doing well. So these are coatings that are primarily used for protection of surfaces like steel and bridges. And we see that, for instance, in Africa, countries like Nigeria, Angola, Uganda, where there is oil refineries that are being built. So all the coatings that go into the pipelines and all the equipment that is used, for extraction of oil and processing of it. That's where, you get all the protective coatings being used. Particularly for Africa, the decorative segment also is doing quite well because of the infrastructure development that is happening across the the continent. We've got a lot of the governments, in Africa driving housing infrastructure. Obviously, as the population grows and as urbanization grows, more and more people are living in the cities, and obviously they need housing, and there is, good growth that's happening in the decorative segments. And then you also have got the marine segment as well. It's doing quite well. As well, the packaging segment as well. All your cane coatings. Obviously, food security is one of the and sustainability is one of the areas where there is a lot of focus. So the cane coatings play an important role with regards to that. So,
Okay.
and then also the big topic across most companies is sustainability and renewable energy. So you've got a lot of solar panels that are being installed, a lot of wind turbines that are being built for wind energy, a lot of electrical vehicles that are being manufactured now. So you've got coatings that go into batteries, doing quite well, and then solar panel coatings and protective coatings for wind turbines as well.
Got you.
Because sustainability is a big topic at the moment, and
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, so
Yes,
when
yeah.
we take a look at the African continent in particular, do we know what the coatings market is estimated to be?
Yes, we estimate the coatings market to be worth about $5.7 billion, which is roughly about 2.5% of what the world coatings market is. It might sound small, but with the growth prospects that we are forecasting for Africa of on average of 3% annually going to 2030, I think there is a great opportunity for Africa. And one fact is that half of the population growth is going to happen in Africa, so it presents a lot of opportunities for business in Africa. The population is young, and demand for housing, for cars, for infrastructure, it can only be forecasted to grow. So yeah, there is going forward a growth of opportunities for coatings in Africa.
Fair enough. You've got some of the most attractive markets out there in the world. South Africa, Nigeria, Morocco, Algeria, when it comes to the continent at least, are in the top 20 most attractive markets in the world for the coatings industry. What makes them attractive?
So the main thing for African markets is the growth in infrastructure.
Okay.
We've seen some new cities being built in Egypt, in Kenya, in Rwanda. So these are all driving, demanding for coatings that that you use on buildings and infrastructure and all that. We've seen also some, data centers with obviously developments in AI and there's infrastructure required for that. So you've got data centers that are being built, and you've got coatings that go in the that, fireproofing coatings, electronic discharge dissipation coatings that go into data centers and all that. So you are seeing a lot of, power generation infrastructure that is also being built. So all this leads to, an increased demand in coatings.
So we've taken a look at some of the opportunities, but I do wonder whether there are challenges, more so when we speak of supply chains. Are we seeing, and there's always, talk about value addition, making sure that there's beneficiation on the continent, et cetera, maybe you can talk to us about the supply chains. Are we seeing that we are importing a lot? Are we heavily relying on imports, or do we have bases that we have set up on the continent where we can produce some of the materials ourselves, and we have the raw materials to do so?
Yes. So Africa has got quite a number of challenges because most of the raw materials that are used in the manufacturing of paints and coatings are imported. So for most countries, manufacturers get exposed to currency fluctuations. If the currency devaluates, it leads to, higher costs of manufacturing, and which affects the margins for the manufacturers. And also the fact that we had issues in the Middle East in terms of the war means that, the raw materials that are imported are coming at a higher price, and this all puts pressure on local manufacturers. And also climate change is not sparing us in Africa at all, because as we can observe and see, is the increase in extreme weather patterns, that is extreme heat, extreme rainfall. And what it means is the demand for in terms of performance of these coatings that we paint, for instance, on the outside of our houses, they have to be much more durable. So this puts pressure on manufacturers and formulators and developers of coatings to make them more durable to withstand, extreme heat and extreme rainfall. So obviously, the pressure on performance puts pressure on cost, and subsequently, affects margins. And also the other challenge is, imports that come from China or India that compete with local manufacturers in Africa. And these products normally come at a cheaper price, and it obviously creates competition for local manufacturer. And the other trend is the products that are being demanded by the market or by people are eco-friendly and healthier products. So what that means is manufacturers needs to produce products that are, a lot kinder to the environment and to, health in the houses that we live, for instance. So in terms of mitigating some of these challenges, I think as Africa, we've got the capacity, we've got the raw materials, and the challenge is that most of the time we export raw materials, and instead of beneficiating those raw materials. But we've got examples of what we can do as Africa. For instance, the Nyanza light metal titanium dioxide manufacturing factory that is being built in Richards Bay, where, as you know, titanium dioxide is one of the key raw materials used in the manufacture of paints, although it's also used in other industries like cosmetics, but it's also used in paints. So that project is an example that, with the 80,000 tons of titanium that they're going to produce, it will cover the needs for South Africa and Africa. And obviously it will reduce the dependence on imports from the rest of the world. And hopefully it will also reduce the cost of that material, since it's a key element in the manufacture of paint. So it's one of the examples that we can use as Africa in terms of manufacturing of other ingredients that are used in the manufacture of paint. The trend, we're seeing this in the rest of the world, Europe and America, where reshoring or localization of production of key materials, because with the supply chain disruptions that are happening now, and there doesn't seem to be an end to it. It was Ukraine, and then it's Middle East, and who knows what's coming in the future. So you need to localize, and I'm glad that a lot of African governments, for instance, when you look at what's happening in Ghana, in South Africa, they are focusing on reindustrialization of local industries, which I think can benefit the paint industry and the whole economy as a whole.
Fair enough. I just want to, before we let you go, get a sense of how what is happening in the Middle East is impacting the industry at large. So we know that the Strait of Hormuz, by and large, is still closed. And so how does that impact our operations, given that we've passed the half-year mark, we're now fully into the second half of the year?
Yes. So to predict when it's going to end, it's difficult. The forecast that we had earlier in the year was that by the time we get to August, September, probably the impasse will be resolved. But it doesn't look like it will. Seems to be continuing. But even if it if we say that it gets resolved today, it will take probably out of up to 12 months for, the whole supply chain system to recover to back to normal. But going to how it's affecting the coating industry and across the world and in Africa, is that most of the materials that are used in the manufacture of paints, like resins, your emulsions, your solvents, they all come from the oil. So if you've got a restricted supply of that, it means those products become scarce and the prices will shoot. Like we've seen earlier on, the paint, some of the raw materials in the industry went up by up to 40-50% in some markets. And the challenge is that in some, most of the African economies, to pass on that cost to the end consumer is difficult. You might pass on some of it, but not all of it. So it's an issue of, raw material prices going up, and also the scarcity of materials, which means you find yourself finding difficulties to supply products to your customers, and that has a negative impact on the economies and the livelihoods as a whole.
Absolutely. Trevor, thank you so much. That's all the time we can afford for now, but we definitely look forward to following this up in the near future, because there's so much to tell about the coatings industry. Thank you very much for your contribution on the Business of Africa podcast. Trevor Mutayi is with Orr and Boss. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Business of Africa podcast, where we bring big and small business issues right to your doorstep. You'll hear from us again in the next fortnight, God willing. Bahaichu. Bula.